I just finished watching this week Blue Eye Samurai, an animation series which has featured in many creators' best of 2023 lists. I wanted to give you an overview of the series and what I consider to be its strengths, but also why I think some of the hype is a little bit undeserved. Beware, there will be spoilers. Broadly speaking, Blue Eye Samurai is the story of Mizu, a mixed-race woman determined to get revenge against the 4 white men who illegally remained in Japan after its borders were closed to the west during the Tokugawa shogunate. Mizu is the protagonist of the series, but there are strong supporting characters, including Akemi, the daughter of a nobleman determined to marry her to the shogun's son, Taigen, a talented swordsman who bullied Mizu during her childhood and wants revenge against her after being humiliated in a duel with her, Ringo, a handless cook who wants to be Mizu's apprentice and become a great samurai himself. The main villain of the series is the Irish smuggler Abijah Fowler and his accomplice Heiji Shindu, who want to take over the shogunate using Western-made weapons. There is a lot to like about the series. First of all, the animation. I think it really is a work of art and another example of how mixing 2D and 3D can work so well. Many scenes of the show are breathtakingly beautiful, especially the ones of Japanese landscapes, but I particularly love the attention to detail, especially in how kimonos and other accessories were designed. For the aesthetics alone, Blue Eye Samurai is very much worth seeing. I also think Mizu is a very compelling main character. Not only is she mixed race and considered a demon by those around her, she's also forced to live as a man for the majority of her life. You can tell Mizu is more comfortable as a warrior, but this deception is something she's forced to endure, not something she would choose for herself. I like this about her character. It's not another story about a girl who is not like other girls, but rather about how much Mizu is forced to hide about herself, and how she must transform into the nightmare others think she is to achieve her vengeance. With Mizu, there's always this tension between vulnerability, insecurity, anger, courage, and stubbornness, which makes her an interesting heroine to follow. I also thought the story and the time period chosen was quite interesting. Seeing the contrast between a more traditional Japan trying to remain closed off to modernity and the destruction brought by Western weapons was thought-provoking, and I didn't really know much about this. I liked how the story was not simply focused on vengeance, but how the stakes got higher and higher for all the characters as the plot of the Irish smuggler to overthrow the shogunate developed. The supporting characters were also interesting for the most part, and although you could identify some tropes, they did not fall into cliches. I have some criticism regarding character development, but I mostly enjoy the company of Akemi, Ringo, Taigen, Seki, and Master Eiji during the series. My favorite episode, however, was the tale of the Ronin and the Bride. I think this is where Blue Eye Samurai was at its finest, featuring cool fighting sequences in the present-day timeline, but also presenting us a much more interesting and nuanced backstory for Mizu than what had been hinted during the first few episodes. The animation of the puppet show, which roughly mirrors Mizu's backstory, was a delight to watch. I also liked seeing Mizu happy. I loved the way she managed to start trusting another human being, and how you could have the glimpse of a life where vengeance was not her goal. Because you could tell she was almost finally at peace, it was awful to see the betrayal she suffered. So, taking those strong points into consideration, I really do think Blue Eye Samurai is a good series that is worth watching. But let me be clear, I don't think it's a masterpiece. I think it could have been, but there are many issues working against it. First, Mizu's plot armor borders on the absurd. Not only is she a master swordswoman with the skills of an Olympic gymnast and a hell of a wrestler, even though she apparently mostly trained by herself, which is crazy, she just never gets that hurt. At a certain point, I had to start ignoring her supposed injuries because they were too distracting. The worst of which was the metal rod or spike through her ankle. Why? Who could possibly keep moving after that? Then, the setting of the series in Japan worked beautifully for the aesthetics and animation, but not so much for the voice work. The fact that so many voice actors struggle to pronounce Japanese words took me out of the universe a bit too much. When the series was at its best, it was not an issue, but it really stood out during the weaker scenes. Sometimes it felt like it was a TV show by actors cosplaying as Japanese. I know it was an American-French production, but I would have loved to see a version dubbed in Japanese. Also, I don't understand why they were so eager to have it take place in Japan if their end goal was just to bring Mizu to the West in London at the end of the show anyway. I also cannot wrap my head around how a TV show that has such an interesting female protagonist was not able to properly flesh out the other women in the series without always resorting to prostitution, brothels, and the sex trade in general. I didn't appreciate the exploitation of women played out as a quirky way to develop someone's character, in this case Princess Akemi's. I could understand if it was part of her arc, but it became the core of it. And the fact that she asked the other women from the brothel to become her ladies-in-waiting at the end was too ridiculous as well. A society that stratified would never allow for such a thing. Many of the sex scenes were bizarre, like a teenage boy's fantasy of what Japan is. It's like the series wanted to make sex to make it more adult and complex, but in my opinion it just took time away from proper character development, and the sex scenes were actually some of the strangest animation in the show, bordering on Uncanny Valley. Finally, and this is probably the biggest issue, the final episode did not make much sense. We see that Mizu throughout the series is gradually becoming more monstrous until she realizes that she cannot take revenge at any cost, especially of other people such as Taigen. In the last episode, however, not only does she inadvertently cause the worst fire ever, she also decides not to kill the man she wanted to kill the entire time just so he can take her to London. Like, why? This is so stupid. Other characters also get their development either pushed aside or put on steroids. Akemi decides she actually doesn't want to be happy with Taigen, she wants to be a great ruler of some kind, in the span of about 10 minutes, and only after she realizes she can use sex to subjugate her husband. Taigen is just sort of there, another character with a huge plot armor but who doesn't really go anywhere in the end. And the same goes for Ringo, who fails at comic relief and was only sort of useful to act as Mizu's conscience at some point, and by the end is just also sort of there as well. To be honest, the finale seemed like it just wanted to have a setup for a season 2 at any cost, including its own characters and the story itself. So it was a disappointment, especially after 7 episodes of rising stakes. All this being said, like I mentioned before, I think Blue Eye Samurai is still worth seeing. But if you think this is the best animation TV show you have ever seen, I have good news for you. There are a lot of series out there I'm sure you'll enjoy. Starting with Arcane, an animated series that is actually worth all the hype it gets. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, don't forget to hit thumbs up and subscribe, and if you can, please share with me your thoughts on Blue Eye Samurai in the comments. Thank you, until next time.